So, how many of you know what Thomas Jefferson did to his Bible? He didn't really care for parts of it, and so he just cut them out. In fact, the Jefferson Bible, he cut them out. When I say cut them out, the Jefferson Bible is the parts of the Bible that Thomas Jefferson liked, cut out of the Bible and pasted onto another page. And it turns out that some of the stuff that he didn't like were the miracles. And in fact, in the Jefferson Bible, there are no miracles, there are no references to Christ's divinity, and there are no versions of the resurrection story. He left all of those out. And to be sure, he thought that once he had done that, he made it better. He said, once he had done that, then there will be found remaining the most sublime and benevolent code of morals which has ever been offered. Now, Jefferson did this to remove what he saw were the corrupting influences of the church leaders. Early church officials thought Jefferson had added things to the story, things that would enhance their own position, power, and privilege. And his thought was to strip off the artificial vestments in which they have been muffled by the priests, who have travestied them into various forms as instruments of riches and power to them. Now, with all due respect to one of the founding fathers of this nation, I don't recommend that when you come across something in the Bible you can't get your mind around, you should cut it out. Just for the record, the pastor of Maplewood United Methodist Church is anti-cutting things out of the Bible. Because the truth is that when we read the Bible, we come across things that we know are impossible. We come across things that our brains tell us ain't no way that could have happened. I mean, we know enough chemistry to know that there's a chemical difference between water and wine. And you can't just zap water and it becomes wine. There are some things you have to add. I'm not sure. I'm not a wine person. What's a wine person called? Vintner? Sommelier? But one who makes it. That's right. We know, for example, the laws of physics, which say, when someone steps out of a boat and onto water, laws of physics will say they will sink. We know we are reading things that are impossible to understand. And we also know biology. We've studied biology enough to understand that when something dies, it's dead. And yet, all of these impossible things happen in the pages of this book. And so what are we to do? We modern minds, we scientifically enlightened minds with these miracle stories. Well, for the next 6 weeks, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to dive into the miracles of Jesus in a series called Signs and Wonders. And we're going to think about Jesus healing people. We're going to think about Jesus feeding people with just one little lunchbox. We're going to think about Jesus calming the storm and all those miracles that are impossible and wonder together about what they might mean for us. How do we process all this stuff? How do our modern minds process these scientific things? Well, in order to answer that question, or at least begin to answer that question, I want to set up a false dichotomy between science and faith. I say it's a false dichotomy. I believe it to be a false dichotomy. I don't think those two things are incompatible. But let's just say, for the sake of this sermon, that's a dichotomy, science and faith. So if I read something in a book that I know is scientifically impossible, and I understand faith and science as a dialectic or a dichotomy, not compatible, then I can approach it in a couple of ways. I can say, oh, well, I know that this is impossible, and yet the church says I need to believe it in order to be a part of the church. But I can't make my brain believe something impossible is possible. So I guess I can't be a part of the church. And I know people who have done that, who have lived in that dialectic and said, well, I'm going to lean into the science one and not think the faith one is quite so important. However, you could also approach it the other way. You could say, all right, I'm reading a story that I know is impossible. And yet, the church says, in order to be a part of the church, I have to believe this thing, and I guess God said it, so that makes it true, so I'm going to believe it, and I'm just going to push science over here out of the way and kind of reject those laws. And if you think there's nobody who has done that, well, I have several ways to end that sentence, and none of them are polite. Suffice it to say that there are those who have made that decision. And I don't know that either one of those is actually the right one, the best one, the healthiest one. I don't understand those two things to be a dialectic, to those two things to be these opposites. But the problem is the offshoot, the consequence of thinking that way, because as it turns out, those two groups of people, those who have rejected science in favor of faith and those who have rejected faith in favor of science, those two groups of people, they don't really get along so well. They belittle one another. They insult one another. They fight with one another. And it's not pretty. I mean, it can get pretty nasty, actually, that those two groups, they have this stereotypical belittling, dismissing the other as nonsense. And that's not helpful. That's not helpful for anyone. That's not helpful for the church. That's not helpful for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because it's not a dialectic. It's not a dichotomy. Following Jesus, stay with me, especially Marvel fans, following Jesus is more like a multiverse. And there are a whole lot of universes where you don't have to reject science or faith, but they can exist together. It was Einstein, in fact, who said, science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. It turns out that miracles aren't even just one thing. Not even in the Bible itself are miracles just one thing. There is no single word in the Bible that we translate as miracle. There are 3 different Greek terms in the New Testament. And one of them we translate as signs, one of them we translate as wonders, and one of them we translate as works of power. And each one of those terms conveys a little bit of a different meaning. A sign signifies something. There's a reality behind that sign to which the sign points. A wonder is one of those things that makes you go, woo, that's awesome. And often you see those two together, signs and wonders. Jesus did many signs and wonders, both signifying something and making us go, woo, that's awesome. And that's the title of our series, Signs and Wonders, the Miracles of Jesus. And I thought we'd just start with the big one. I thought we'd go ahead and get the big one out of the way. Easter Sunday, the big one, the big miracle of miracles. We stake everything on this one in a way. This is the one that affirms all the others. Paul himself even wrote it. If Christ has not been raised, then our proclamation is in vain, and your faith is in vain. Whew, Paul does not give us a lot of wiggle room there. So what are we to do with this big one? Knowing the laws of biology, knowing that dead things stay dead. This is a story that, I gotta tell you, it's pretty audacious. You know what we claim here, right? We claim that this Rabbi Jesus of Nazareth died, was killed, was executed by the state. And after his execution, his dead body was buried in the ground. And that tomb was sealed with an enormous rock. And that body stayed in that tomb for an entire day, the Sabbath day, until the next morning when Mary Magdalene shows up at that tomb expecting to be present with the dead body of her rabbi, and instead discovering life where she had expected to encounter death. Life where you least expect it to be. That's That's a wild story. That is, on many levels, an unbelievable story. And I use that term very intentionally. On a lot of levels, we shouldn't believe that story. That's a miracle, isn't it? It's unbelievable. I could come at this story with my science bias glasses on. No way, that did not happen. I know biology. I know the laws of entropy. That did not happen. Or we could come at it with our God bias on, our God glasses on, and say, oh, no, it did happen because it says it in the Bible it happened, so I know it defied the laws of nature. But I'm not going to think about those because God said it, so it did it. The end. Or we could seek one of those universes in the middle where it's possible to not throw away either thing, but to kind of live in the midst of the conversation. We could just revel together in the delight of a story in which life conquers death. We could just enjoy this fantastic story exactly as it is without needing to attach any dogmatic conditions to it. Listen to this fantastic story I've got for you, friends. It's an amazing story. It's a wonderful story. And you have to believe every single word of it exactly as it is or it doesn't count. Whoa, dude. What if we could just do the first part of that sentence and just enjoy this wonderful story together? Could it not be enough just to let the resurrection story be an announcement that somehow or other life is stronger than death? And isn't that a miracle? And isn't that a miracle? Isn't life itself a miracle? Ask any new parent. Isn't life itself the miracle? What if this is just a story about the miracle that is life? About that death is not the end of things, that life is a mystery to us, and that there is a bright hope for tomorrow. Is it not a miracle that God brings life where we don't expect to find it? Is it not especially a miracle in this day and age when death is being constantly glorified on our news feeds and videos of violence and destruction are pervasive, amplified in our minds by these algorithms that are designed to keep us afraid, and in this ongoing elevated condition, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and oh, how many of us have chosen fawn. Is it not a miracle to just announce that life is present where death is pervasive? To hear a story in which life emerges from an unexpected place. And this resurrection of Jesus story is only one of multiple stories in the Gospels in which life emerges from unexpected places. We've got Luke 7 where Jesus brings a widow's son back to life. We've got Mark 8 where Jesus brings the daughter of Jairus back to life. We got John 9 where Jesus brings Lazarus back to life who's been dead for 4 days. And for each of these stories, we could go round and round and argue about the mechanism of the actual resuscitation of this dead tissue. We could argue the miracle of reanimating a dead body versus the science of entropy. And that would be kind of fun to do if we could do it without coming to blows. We could do that. Or maybe we could just enter into this story together, a story that says that ultimately death is not the end, life is a mystery, and there's hope for a better tomorrow. And let me tell you, if that's not true, if there is no hope for a better tomorrow, then yes, for sure, all my proclamation is in vain, and all our faith is in vain. But the reality is, the truth is, that there is hope. It is true. There is a hope for a tomorrow that is better than today, and somehow or other, that hope for a brighter tomorrow, it is infused into this story, not dogmatically, not doctrinally, but poetically, mystically, even magically. There is hope in the midst of this story, and when we enter into this story as a source of hope, we will hear the words of Colossians differently this time. Resurrection is now an opportunity to live a new life, to set your minds on things that are above, to step from the past and leave behind all that has preventing you from living the life that you are intended to live. This is a demonstration of how God brings life where you never expect to find it. Mary was not looking for a living, breathing Jesus when she came to the tomb, but she found one. And what was the very first thing she did? What was the very first thing that Mary did upon encountering the living Jesus Christ? She went and shared that news with others. Hey, friends, guess who I saw? And you notice what she didn't do. She didn't come to the boys and say, listen, boys, Jesus is alive, and you have to believe my story, every word of it, or it doesn't count for you. No, no, no. There is no dogmatic attachment to Mary Magdalene's sharing of Christ. She's just sharing how she has experienced life in a place that she didn't expect it. And so what do we do with this resurrection miracle? Well, I think that's what we do. We follow the example of Mary Magdalene. We look for life where we at least expect to find it, and then we go and tell others what we have seen, telling them that death isn't the end, that life is ultimately a mystery, and that there is hope for a better tomorrow. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.